Here is a question that should have a simple answer. And for most Canadians, it does not. How much money do you need to retire? Not approximately. Not as much as possible. The specific number. The number you need to have saved and invested. The number at which you can stop working, draw an income from your portfolio, and have a reasonable confidence that the money will last as long as you do. Most Canadians do not know this number. Surveys consistently find that the majority of working Canadians have no specific retirement savings target. They are saving, or trying to save, toward a destination they cannot name. In 1994, a financial planner named William Bengen published a paper in the Journal of Financial Planning that changed retirement planning permanently. He had spent years analyzing historical U.S. market data going back to 1926, looking at every possible 30-year retirement window and asking a simple question: what is the maximum percentage a retiree can withdraw from their portfolio each year, adjusted for inflation, without running out of money? The answer was 4%. 4% of your portfolio in year 1, adjusted for inflation every year after. Across every historical market cycle Bengen could analyze, through the Great Depression, World War II, the 1970s inflation shock, the 1987 crash, a portfolio invested in a mix of stocks and bonds survived a 30-year retirement at a 4% withdrawal rate approximately 95% of the time. One number: 30 years of research. The retirement formula that changed everything. This video explains exactly how it works, how it has been updated in 2026, and, most importantly, why Canadian retirees with CPP and OAS may need significantly less in their personal portfolio than the formula first suggests. The 4% rule is built on one foundational insight. If your portfolio is invested in a diversified mix of stocks and bonds, and your annual withdrawal is 4% of the starting portfolio value, adjusted for inflation each year, historical market data shows your portfolio will survive a 30-year retirement in approximately 95% of all scenarios. The formula in plain language. Step 1. Decide how much annual income you need in retirement, beyond any government benefits you will receive. Step 2. Divide that number by 0.04. That is your portfolio target. Or, more simply, multiply your annual spending by 25. The math: need $40,000 per year from your portfolio implies need $1 million saved. Need $60,000 per year. Need $1,500,000. Need $80,000 per year. Need $2 million. Need $100,000 per year implies need $2,500,000. How the inflation adjustment works. In year 1 of retirement, you withdraw 4% of your portfolio, say $40,000 from a $1 million portfolio. In year 2, you do not recalculate 4% of the current balance. You take the year $1 amount and increase it by inflation. If inflation was 3%, you withdraw $41,200 in year 2. The following year, you take that amount and inflate it again. The withdrawal amount grows with inflation, maintaining your purchasing power, regardless of how the portfolio has moved. This is the critical distinction. The 4% rule is not 4% of whatever your portfolio is worth each year. It is 4% of the starting balance, then inflated forward. This protects you from reducing your income after a bad market year. Why it works. The research behind it. Bengen's finding was confirmed and expanded in 1998 by 3 professors at Trinity University, Cooley, Hubbard, and Walls, in what became known as the Trinity Study. They tested multiple asset allocations across multiple historical periods and found that a 4% withdrawal rate with a 50% to 75% equity portfolio survived 30 years in approximately 95% to 98% of historical scenarios. The research that had begun as one planner's calculation became one of the most cited findings in retirement planning research. Before applying the 4% rule to a Canadian retirement, there is one critical difference between the Canadian and the American version of this calculation. The 4% rule was designed for a retiree who funds their entire retirement from personal savings. It does not assume any government income. Every dollar of retirement spending comes from the portfolio. Most Canadian retirees are not in this position. The Canada Pension Plan and Old Age Security provide a guaranteed, inflation-indexed income stream for life, regardless of what the stock market does, regardless of portfolio performance, regardless of sequence of returns. For Canadians, these benefits are not supplemental to the retirement calculation. They are a foundational layer that changes the entire math. The 2026 numbers. CPP maximum monthly benefit at age 65. $1,507.65 per month. $18,092 annually. Average new CPP recipient. $877.01 per month. $10,524 annually. OAS for ages 65 to 74. $751.97 per month. $9,024 annually. Average combined CPP and OAS, approximately $19,548 per year. What this means for the 4% rule, the portfolio calculation only applies to the spending that CPP and OAS do not cover. If a Canadian needs $60,000 per year in retirement and receives $19,548 from CPP and OAS, the portfolio only needs to fund $40,448 per year. At the 4% rule, $40,448 divided by 0.04 equals approximately $1,011,000 in personal savings needed, versus the $1,500,000 a purely portfolio-funded $60,000 retirement would require. CPP and OAS reduced the required portfolio by approximately $490,000. This is the starting point for every Canadian retirement calculation, not the American version of the 4% rule, the Canadian version, which begins by subtracting the guaranteed government income from total spending and applying the formula only to the gap. Here is the vault, the specific Canadian advantage that makes the portfolio requirement significantly smaller, and that most Canadians manage completely wrong. Delaying CPP. Every year a Canadian delays starting their CPP beyond age 65. Their monthly benefit increases by 8.4%. Delay to age 70, the maximum deferral, and the benefit increases permanently by 42%. The average Canadian CPP at age 65 is $877.01 per month. At age 70, delayed by 5 years, that same person receives approximately $1,245 per month. The difference, $368 per month. $4,420 per year. For life. Inflation adjusted. Guaranteed by the federal government. Now apply the 4% rule to that difference. $4,420 in additional annual guaranteed income, capitalized at the 4% rule, is equivalent to having $110,500 more in your personal portfolio. Delaying CPP from 65 to 70 for the average Canadian is the equivalent of arriving at retirement with $110,500 more in savings, without saving a single additional dollar. without any market risk, just by waiting 5 years to collect. The objection everyone raises: what if I die early and never collect the delayed benefit? The break-even point, the age at which the total lifetime CPP received from delaying to 70 exceeds the total received from starting at 65, is approximately age 83 to 84. The average Canadian life expectancy significantly exceeds this. For the majority of Canadians who reach 65 in reasonable health, delaying CPP is the mathematically superior decision. There is one exception: Canadians who genuinely need the income at 65 because they have insufficient portfolio savings to bridge the 5-year gap between retirement and 70. For them, the immediate income is necessary regardless of the lifetime maximization argument. But for Canadians who have savings to bridge the gap, delaying CPP is one of the highest return decisions available. The practical bridge strategy: retire at 65. Draw from TFSA or non-registered accounts to cover living expenses from 65 to 70. Begin CPP at 70 with the full 42% premium. The TFSA withdrawal does not trigger OAS clawback. The bridge period draws down the non-tax-advantaged accounts first, preserving the RRSP/RRIF for later, which is the optimal withdrawal sequencing anyway. The 4% rule is not static. It was derived from historical data that ends in 1992. The financial world of 2026 is different in ways that matter, and the researchers and planners who built the rule have updated their thinking. Bengen's 2025 update, 4.7%. In his 2025 book, Bengen updated his research to incorporate small-cap equities and international diversification. His new finding: for a well-diversified portfolio, the safe withdrawal rate is 4.7%, meaning a more diversified investor can withdraw more than the original 4% suggested. This is good news for investors who hold a genuinely global, diversified portfolio rather than a simple S&P 500 and bond mix. Morningstar's 2026 finding: 3.9%. Morningstar's 2026 State of Retirement Income Report sets the safe starting withdrawal rate at 3.9% for a 90% probability of lasting 30 years, assuming a 30 to 50% equity allocation. This is up slightly from 3.7% in 2025. Improved return expectations for both stocks and bonds pushed it higher. On a $500,000 portfolio, the difference between 3.9% and 4.0% is $500 per year. Not dramatic, but the directional signal matters. The flexible approach, up to 5.7%. Morningstar's research also shows that retirees willing to adjust spending in weaker market years, spending a bit less after a bad year, spending a bit more after a good one, can start as high as 5.7% while maintaining portfolio sustainability. This guardrails approach is more realistic for many retirees than a rigid fixed withdrawal. The 40-year retirement problem. The 4% rule was designed for a 30-year retirement. A Canadian retiring at 60 may need the portfolio to last 35 to 40 years. For longer retirements, a more conservative 3.5% is commonly used by Canadian financial planners. Or the flexible guardrails approach is applied to handle the additional uncertainty. The RRIF mandatory minimum wrinkle. The Canadian-specific complication. Here is something the original 4% rule did not account for, and that affects every Canadian with registered retirement savings. At age 71, Canadian law requires converting an RRSP to a RRIF, a Registered Retirement Income Fund. Beginning at age 72, the CRA requires mandatory minimum withdrawals from the RRIF, and those minimums increase every year as the account holder ages. At age 72, the mandatory minimum withdrawal is approximately 5.28% of the RRIF's January 1st value. By age 80, it reaches approximately 6.82%. By age 90, it is approximately 11.92%. A Canadian with $500,000 in a RRIF at age 72 must withdraw approximately $26,400, whether they need it or not. At Morningstar's 3.9% safe rate, the recommended withdrawal would be $19,500. The mandatory minimum is $6,900 more, and that additional income is taxable, potentially pushing the retiree into a higher bracket, and could trigger OAS clawback if total income exceeds $93,454. The RRIF minimum does not care about the 4% rule. It is a legal requirement. The solution, which requires planning years before retirement, is to draw down RRSP/RRIF balances earlier, use Roth-style conversions strategically, and maximize the TFSA in the accumulation phase so that more of the retirement asset base is in an account with no mandatory minimums and no OAS clawback implications. The 4% rule becomes most powerful when applied to specific scenarios. Here are 3 Canadian retirement pictures, each representing a different savings level and government benefit combination. That show what retirement actually looks like in 2026 numbers. Scenario A, the average Canadian retiree. Portfolio, $500,000. Government income, average CPP, $877 per month, plus OAS, $752 per month, equals $19,548 per year combined. Portfolio at 4% withdrawal, $20,000 per year. Total retirement income, $39,548 per year. Approximately $3,296 per month. This is the income picture for a Canadian who retires with $500,000 in savings and average government benefits. $3,296 per month before tax. Workable in lower-cost areas. Tight in Toronto or Vancouver. Scenario B, the optimized retiree. Portfolio, $800,000. CPP delayed to $70,000, $1,245 per month. OAS, $752 per month. Government income, $23,964 per year. Portfolio at 4% withdrawal, $32,000 per year. Total, $55,968 per year. Approximately $4,664 per month. This is the picture for a Canadian who saved more and delayed CPP. More than $4,600 per month. Comfortable retirement across most Canadian cities. The CPP delay alone added $4,420 in annual income versus starting at 65. Scenario C, the lean fire Canadian. Annual spending target, $40,000. CPP and OAS expected to cover approximately half, $19,548. Portfolio needs to fund $20,452. At the 4% rule, $511,300 in personal savings needed. This is financial independence achieved with a relatively modest portfolio. Possible for a Canadian because government benefits cut the portfolio requirement nearly in half. Many Canadians working toward early retirement are surprised to discover their target is closer than the American-focused FIRE calculators suggested, because those calculators do not account for CPP and OAS. The withdrawal sequencing rule for all 3 scenarios. Draw down accounts in this order. Non-registered accounts first. Capital gains taxed at 50% inclusion, but lower than RRSP RRIF income, RRSP/RTRAIF. Draw strategically to manage bracket and clawback risk. TFSA last. Completely tax-free. No OAS clawback. No mandatory minimums. The TFSA is the most valuable retirement account a Canadian has, not just because it grows tax-free, but because in retirement, TFSA withdrawals create zero tax consequences and zero OAS clawback risk. Preserve it as long as possible. William Bengen published a paper in 1994 that answered one of personal finance's most important questions: how much is enough? The answer, 4%, survived every major market crisis of the 20th century in historical testing. It has been refined since. Bengen himself now says 4.7% for a well-diversified portfolio. Morningstar 2026 says 3.9% for a conservative baseline. The flexible approach says up to 5.7% if you can adjust spending in weaker years. The honest answer for a Canadian retiring at 65 with a 30-year horizon, somewhere between 3.9% and 4.7%, with 4% remaining the most practical starting point. But the Canadian application of the formula starts with a subtraction. Subtract your expected CPP and OAS income from your total spending. Apply the 4% rule only to the gap. The average Canadian's government benefits replace nearly $490,000 in required personal portfolio. At current rates. Delay CPP to 70 if you can bridge the gap. It is worth $110,500 in portfolio equivalent for the average Canadian. Preserve the TFSA as long as possible. It is the only retirement account with no mandatory minimums, no tax on withdrawal, and no OAS clawback risk. Hold a 1 to 2 year cash buffer outside the portfolio to protect against sequence of returns risk. The 4% rule did not give everyone an easy retirement. It gave everyone a formula, a specific, testable, historically grounded starting point for the most important financial question most Canadians will ever face. The formula is: multiply your annual spending gap by 25. That is your number. Now you know it.